Samsung Galaxy Unpacked 2020 has brought a lot of new updates, including 5G, enhanced cameras, storage updates, spec changes, and more. I'm Beth Motter here with ZDNet's Larry Dignan and Tech Republic's Bill Detweiler. Larry, why don't we go ahead and start with you? What did we see? What happened? Give us a rundown.
All right, so the rundown here is basically that, Samsung did make all of its S20 devices 5G capable. And that's a pretty big move because now it makes 5G basically mainstream. The other thing Samsung really tried to do was take a leap forward on the camera technology. And the overall message here for Samsung, which remember, Samsung's talking to a B2B audience as well as consumer. But what they're basically saying is that the average lifespan of a device is getting longer. So they're positioning the S20 as a device that's really future-proof. And, I think they made their point pretty well with the specs. For instance, all the S20s have at least 12 gig of RAM, which is, pretty big. The other part they did is all the S20s have, SD card capability. So you can add a terabyte of storage if you want. The other thing they did was hit multiple price points. And, so while the S20 Ultra loaded will run you about $1,600, and when I say loaded, it's 512 gig of storage and 16 gig of RAM. But then the lowest one at 128 and 12 gigabyte of RAM, that one starts at $999. So if you can put an SD card, that one may serve a good purpose for you too. So basically, I got to check out all three devices. And I will say the lowest one, the S20, feels best in your hand. It's a 6.2 inch screen. It's light, it's thin, it's sleek, it's good. I looked at it and go, okay, this can go in my pocket. The middle ground one is the S20 Plus, which takes you up to a 6.7 inch screen. And then you got the Ultra, which is a 6.9 inch screen. And that one, I was a little on the fence with because it is big. I carry around a Note 10 and the Note 10 Plus, and the Note 10 Plus seems so much sleeker than the Ultra. And, the other thing is on the back of the phone, there's a big appendage to host all these cameras because the camera technology in the S20 Ultra is pretty ridiculous. It's one camera has 108 megapixels, and it's just loaded. Like from a camera perspective, there's 4 cameras in the rear. It can do a lot of stuff. And it also utilizes Qualcomm's latest technology and 865 chipset, which basically enables a lot more digital photography that will approach DSLR sort of capabilities. And the Ultra also has a 100x zoom. And part of that's a hybrid thing. Part of it's a, hardware zoom. And then after that, it goes digital. Where the other two devices, the S20 and the S20 Plus, it's all digital zoom. But the fact that the Ultra can go up to 100 times, I only saw it go up to 30 times zoom. And, in the initial test I saw, they're updating firmware to get you to that 100 times zoom. But it was pretty impressive. Just the way it kind of auto crops, it does a lot of neat things. But then again, it should because it's $1,600, right? So when you're talking about that price, you're sort of like, all right, this is top of the line. It'll last me 3 years. But then, you're kind of looking at the foldable devices too. And if that price is in the ballpark, you might go for the foldable, cool factor, even though it's basically a big beta test at this point. But yeah, there's a lot to digest here. But what I think Samsung did well was they really kicked off the 5G upgrade cycle. They hit multiple price points. And, the other bonus here is that they cut the price on the S10 by $150 each device, no matter whatever the price was. So for enterprises, that can help the upgrade feature. That can help upgrades too.
Okay, so a lot of upgrades to hardware and whatnot. One thing we didn't really hear about, though, was the Note. And I know both you and Larry have Notes. What's its future kind of look like?
Yeah, so I think it's a little more it gets a little cloudier for the Note. The differentiation between the S10 and the Note was, because they were running a lot of the same hardware, was really the S Pen. So, like Larry was saying, I have a Note 10 Plus that I carry around. It has the S Pen inside it there. It does some really interesting things for me. I actually like using the S Pen. I like the handwriting and the handwriting to text functionality of it. It makes things a little easier. So that's still going to be a differentiator. But when you look at things like screen size, it's not. You've got the Note 10 Plus that I have. It's got a 6.8-inch screen. The S20 Ultra's 6.9-inch screen. So you actually get a bigger screen than, on the S20 Ultra than you do on the Note. So I think that's something for Samsung to work out, is just how the Note works its way into their, sort of Galaxy lineup, right? Is like, what's the upsell? Because one thing Larry mentioned is the pricing on the S10s comes down, but the pricing on the Notes didn't. They kept those the same. So if you're in the enterprise, you have to make the decision, am I going with 5G Ultra? Am I going with a 5G device here? Or am I going, now, the Note had a top-end sort of 5G, or am I going with a device that has a stylus with it? So, you kind of make those, it's kind of that trade-off. So I think Samsung does have a little bit of work to do on the differentiation between the Notes and their S line of phones. Now, maybe in the future, we'll see a merging of the two lines together. We didn't see it, we haven't seen it yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if down the road, you just start to see maybe the Note and the S line of phones come together into one device. It just has a stylus, has 5G, has a variety of screen sizes. Like Larry said, that's something that Samsung has always done. As long as I've been covering Samsung, they like to swarm the market with a ton of devices in all different sort of flavors and all different sizes and all different price points. It's just like, how many barcodes can I get out there to hit such a wide audience? So maybe this is a chance, though, as the devices become so similar, for the Note and the Galaxy lines, the S lines, to come together into one device.
Could be interesting to see what happens, but you briefly talked, Larry, 5G enhancements, camera enhancements, a lot of storage upgrades. What will this do for the enterprise?
So Samsung, they kind of walk through a few interesting arguments for B2B and the enterprise about how these devices get used. And the most interesting case they made about 5G was that it's more secure. So they talked up collaboration, video calls, document sharing, those type of things, and how much easier it is with 5G. But they also noted there's a security argument where, so basically right today, if you're doing file sharing or something, you're typically, you're not doing that over your LTE 4G connection. So you would probably go into a coffee house, try out the Wi-Fi, and you would share documents that way. But as we all know, that can be a bit insecure unless you turn on your VPN and do all that kind of stuff. So basically, Samsung's argument is that these devices will usher in an era where they're basically saying that 5G there'll be corporate policies where it basically says, you can use Wi-Fi at home, use Wi-Fi at the office, but outside of that, stick to the 5G network, just because it's as fast and as secure, which I think is an interesting argument. They also showed there's a secure element in the Ultra, and I think the other S20s too. But the thing that's interesting there is you can put your ID card on it, so you don't have to carry around your card for work. And the smart card thing's interesting because the cards are cheap, but the ecosystem around it can be expensive. So that's an interesting point. They also had some features where, they're working on partnerships with Blue Jeans and WebEx on integration. The phone has Google Duo integrated in natively, so you can do a video call just as easy as you would make a phone call. I question that a little bit because, I don't know many folks that are using Duo, to be honest. So I do kind of wonder about that a bit, but it's interesting, but what they're doing, they're setting this up so collaboration and document sharing and all that stuff combines with security to have some real, enterprise perks. The other thing that's interesting here was, well, there's two more things that are interesting. One was, so when you share a doc, you now share it. Today, you have to share it through a third-party cloud provider, whether it's OneDrive, Google Drive, whatever. There's an option in the S20, so you can map it to a network drive now. So that's interesting because some companies don't want their information on devices and third-party clouds anyway. So you can share documents that way. So Samsung's put a lot of thought into, these little enterprise things that make sense. The other feature that really stuck out from a B2B standpoint was that you can allocate RAM to certain apps. So the S20 Ultra can allocate RAM to 5 different apps and say these are corporate apps that you have to use all the time. They eat up space. You can basically just carve out space for them. And the S20 and the S20 Plus, they can allocate RAM to 3 apps. But it's just those little touches that, would matter to an enterprise company and administrator, those type of things. And then you combine it with Knox and Dex and the other perks. It's pretty clear from this that Samsung wants to go after, the corporate market way more, which isn't surprising because Apple's doing that too, right? So if you look at, and this goes for even wireless carriers, right? I mean, a lot of the growth is on the business lines. And I think that's where, that's what Samsung's gunning for. So there were a lot of, they made reference to foldables and a bunch of other stuff. And, they had a feature that you can music share. So, the music playlist goes through the S20, which is interesting. But, in a lot of ways, a lot of these features are more B2B focused.
A lot of new hardware and technology coming from Samsung Unpacked 2020. To figure out what hardware and technology works best for you, be sure to stick with ZDNet and Tech Republic. Thanks for watching.